Hello, I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO and COO of Treasury Careers. Thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, Continuous Dynamic Planning, the CFO's 2018 Mandate. I would like to thank our webinar partner today, Host Analytics, whose strong commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible today. 2018 planning is on the horizon, if not already in full swing. Do not let your 2018 budget be a strategic anchor on your company's ability to anticipate, respond, and react effectively to dynamic market conditions. Organizations of all sizes are transforming their finance departments by upgrading from Excel, outdated legacy planning software, or ERP modules to cost-effective, cloud-based budgeting and planning solutions that fuel business agility by supporting dynamic, driver-based planning and forecasting. Today, you'll discover how organizations that implement dynamic driver-based planning allow finance to deliver strategic value by acting as trusted advisors across departmental lines, identifying the right growth opportunities, and providing senior management with a dynamic financial plan that informs better decisions across the enterprise. Before I welcome our featured speakers to the webinar, I'm going to offer a few quick words about TreasuryJobs.com, cover a few housekeeping items, and review our learning objectives as they offer our value proposition to you in investing your valuable time with us today. A few words about Treasury Careers and TreasuryJobs.com. Treasury Careers offers content and resources that empower Treasury professionals to own their career success. We focus on Treasury job opportunities, a wealth of Treasury certification resources, Treasury and FP&A best practices, complimentary webinars like the one today, and yes, stay tuned for even more. Now for the exciting housekeeping items. The slides are currently available under the handouts area in your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll send you links via email to the presentation and recording to the webinar over the next 24 hours. For those of you interested in CTP or FP&A credit, you need to answer all the polling questions and remain on for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions on CTP or FP&A credit, please send an email to ernie@treasurycareers.com. We'd like to hear from you today, so we can take your questions in the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel at any time during the webinar. We do our best to get to your questions during the Q&A session at the tail end of the webinar. Fear not, if we do not get to your question, we will follow up with you directly after the webinar. Finally, we appreciate your consideration in taking a short survey at the end of the webinar today, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable times. Now our learning objectives for today. We'd like you to understand the benefits to your organization in moving from a static to a dynamic budgeting and forecasting environment, understand specific data sources, types, and tactics that companies are using to focus on the right customers and right products to deliver profitable growth, and to be able to develop and deliver a business case to upgrade from Excel legacy systems or ERP modules to a cloud-based budgeting and planning solution. So we have two great speakers to help us accomplish our learning objectives today. Our featured speakers today are John O'Rourke and Rick Odom. John O'Rourke is the Vice President of Strategic Marketing at Host Analytics. With a background in accounting and finance, John has over 30 years of experience in the software industry, including 20 years of experience in EPM product marketing at Hyperion, Oracle, and Host. He's worked with many customers and partners on financial reporting and planning initiatives, and has spoken and written on many topics in enterprise performance management. He's also held positions in strategic marketing and product marketing at Dun & Bradstreet Software, Keenan, and Decision. John has a BS degree in accounting from Bentley University and an MBA from Boston College. Our other featured speaker today is Rick Odom. Rick has over 30 years of experience in financial planning and analysis, and is currently a senior manager with Welch Allyn Global Business Unit of Hillrom, a medical device manufacturer. He's responsible for coordinating the consolidation of quarterly global revenue and expense forecasts, as well as the annual budget. He is a strong advocate for rolling forecasts and has spoken frequently on the topic of how to get started. He understands the process from the practical side because he's embedded within the business, serving as the finance lead for the administrative cost centers based at Welch Allyn. With that, it is my distinct pleasure to hand the floor over to John O'Rourke. John, the floor is yours. Please take it away. Thanks, John.
All right, thanks, Ernie, and greetings, everyone. Welcome, and thanks for joining us today. Well, it's that time of year, the calm before the storm of budgeting for fiscal 2018. So today we're going to talk about the challenges organizations face in budgeting and planning for the next fiscal year. We'll talk about best practices and techniques that leading organizations are adopting in continuous planning. We'll talk about the business benefits and impacts. Then we'll go from theory to practice with a live case study from our friend and customer, Rick Odom from Hillrom. Then we'll take your questions at the end. So if you have questions as we're going through the session, feel free to log them in, and we'll take them at the end of the session. But let's go ahead and get started. So let's start with the challenges that we all face in budgeting and planning for the next 12 to 18 months. And here's some of the key things we hear from clients. New regulations, like the upcoming changes in revenue recognition and lease accounting, putting a lot of pressure on organizations. The UK's exit from the European Union, and also the Trump administration and the changes it might bring to corporate tax rates, regulation, as well as healthcare. Global competition, shorter product life cycles are putting more pressures on organizations. There's increasing volatility in the market. Think about changing oil and other commodity prices, as well as exchange rates. There's more data than ever coming from internal systems, websites, as well as external sources, such as social media. And there's a more tech-savvy workforce with millennials coming into management positions in finance. So all this is putting new pressures on finance to really reduce reliance on spreadsheets and manual processes, and a lot more interest now in using dynamic planning techniques, such as the ones we're going to talk about today. There's also more demand for analytics and scenario modeling to leverage big data sources and try to harness that data to improve decision making, and increasing use of new technologies like cloud and mobile to support anytime, anywhere access to information. Next slide. This is validated by some recent research from Aberdeen Group on the challenges they see in FP&A. Ernie, do you want to talk through the results of their 2016 survey?
Sure. Thank you very much, John. I think what's really interesting about this slide is that if you look at the bottom four, not the top, the 49%, but the bottom four challenges are really things that limit business agility. So as we take those things away, that really enables us to have that business agility and really react to that market volatility. So what John and Rick will talk to, is how you can overcome some of these challenges. But again, poor communication, coordination, collaboration issues, inaccurate budgets and forecasts, inability to trace the business case, creating budget and forecasts that are old and stale and resource intensive. Those are all things that inhibit business agility and also inhibit continuous planning. And I think what is pretty clear is that the root cause of this is really a lack of that functionality in the technology. And we'll talk about how some of the cloud-based systems are allowing companies to overcome these challenges. John, you have anything to add on these results?
That's perfect. I think this can validate some of the things we're seeing in the market. And this morning I actually had a preview of Aberdeen's 2017 survey, and very similar challenges coming up in 2017. So let's go forward. And what is continuous planning? The best definition I've seen comes from my friend Rob Kugel over at Ventana Research. And his definition is continuous planning uses technology to enable rapid planning and review cycles to support a more agile organizations. I think that's a good overall definition. I would maybe augment that with rapid and frequent planning and review cycles, because it's not just about doing them fast, but being able to repeat them on a regular basis. This is really the alternative to managing on static budgets, which, as we all know, are often obsolete by the time they are approved, in December or January or February, depending how long your budgeting process takes. And then you spend the rest of the year explaining why the actuals, varied from the budget, instead of really thinking about what's happening in the business and then starting to reallocate and update your plans based on that. And some key techniques used in continuous planning are rolling forecasts and driver-based planning techniques. So let's take a look at these in the next couple of slides here. So first we'll start with rolling forecast. And there are really two flavors of forecast depicted here in this chart. First one is a traditional forecast. We combine the actual results, say, for Q1 with the budget for the remainder of the year, or with an updated forecast for the remainder of the year. And this can be helpful, right, as it gives managers an opportunity to update their revenue expense projections and assumptions and adjust resource allocations for the rest of the fiscal year. The chart on the bottom is a rolling forecast, and it's more of a 5-quarter rolling forecast. So in this case, the first quarter actuals are combined with an updated forecast, not just for the rest of the fiscal year, but actually for the next 5 quarters going out into the next fiscal year. So the advantage of this approach is that the forecast extends beyond the end of the fiscal year, so you avoid what we often call the fiscal cliff that occurs with traditional forecasting. That means if it takes you until, say, February, March of next year to finalize your budget, the company actually has revenue and expense planning assumptions it can work with in the new year. And as we'll see, in some cases, this actually can eliminate the need for an annual budget. So next slide, actually you're already there, so stay there. Here's another depiction of the 5-quarter rolling forecast. Here you can actually see actual results in gray. You have forecast data being added in blue, and then the out periods are there in white. And again, another advantage of this approach is that it gives the organization a head start on next year's budget. In some cases, this approach, after a few cycles of using it and getting comfortable, can actually eliminate the need for an annual budget. A couple of our customers actually are doing that already. They've started adding rolling forecasts as an adjunct to the budget, and then eventually just stop doing the annual budget. The reality is that most organizations who have implemented rolling forecasts still have the annual budget process, but now the annual budget is done. It's done more quickly and at a more summarized level, and is used really to set initial targets. Then as the year unfolds and actual results come in, new planning assumptions are collected from managers by the rolling forecast. This can be done on a quarterly or monthly basis, or even more frequently if needed. Performing a rolling forecast process using Excel spreadsheets to collect new planning data monthly or quarterly can be very painful, and it's much easier to support this with cloud-based planning software that have pre-built functionality to support this type of process, as well as collaboration capabilities and best practices that really allow this to happen quite easily. Next slide. Another popular planning technique that often goes hand in hand with rolling forecasts is we call driver-based planning. And here, instead of having managers budget for every single line item in their cost center budget, the focus here is on key metrics that drive other line items and calculations. So an example shown here, we're focusing on number of employees in our cost center, and then the average annual cost for communications, computers, and office supplies. And from those lines, we can calculate and forecast annual communication costs, computer costs, and office supplies. And then analyzing the budget variances, we can also understand the true drivers behind the variances, where in traditional budgeting, this level of detail is often not readily available, and it's on some disconnected set of working papers or separate spreadsheet in someone's computer. You'll often see this technique used for other areas, such as travel expenses or even revenue forecasting. It really saves a lot of time and effort in the budgeting and forecasting process. So a couple other comments. Ernie, do you want to talk about some of these other comments on driver-based planning?
Sure. Thank you very much, John. So I've been involved in quite a bit of CFO research over the past few years, and some of this has been focused on driver-based planning. So really, just to take it up a level, I think there's some confusion. So it's really a three-step process. You want to identify the factors that drive company value, and what we're starting to see more and more from companies and CFOs are really focused on non-financial assets. So they're really starting to focus on customer behavior and employee behavior, and those are things that are driving that company value. So we're starting to look at things like customer churn, lifecycle customer value, employee satisfaction. So you want to identify those factors, and then you have to establish relationships between the KPIs and the value drivers. And then at the end of the day, you need to incentivize actions by the employees that impact performance, measured, captured by KPIs that impact company value. What I think is really fascinating is we're starting to see a real shift in terms of the key drivers of company value, and we're going to have to start to pivot just a little bit and focus on how to manage non-financial assets. So I think that paradigm is changing quite a bit as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and break things up a little bit. Let's go ahead and ask our first polling question, and this will start to tee up as John starts to talk about the technology companies are using in order to complete their budgeting and forecasting process. So I've gone ahead and launched the first polling question, asking you to share with us the software that your organization uses for budgeting and planning. We have Excel, spreadsheets and emails. We have ERP or GL system. Maybe you have an on-premise EPM application. You have a cloud-based EPM application, or you're really not sure at this point how your company does that. A few quick reminders. Those of you interested in CTP or FP&A credit, you'll have to stay in the line and answer all these polling questions. Of course, we'd love everyone to answer all of our polling questions, and we'd love to take your questions in the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another 3 or 4 seconds, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get John's initial take, whether he thought this was in line with what he thought. But then what will happen next is John will go ahead and share some great results from a BPM partner survey. So that will help us out as well. So let me go ahead and close that polling question here. Let me go ahead and close the polling question in a moment here. And let me go ahead and share those results with you. Okay. John, do you have any initial thoughts here?
And just write them down real quickly here. So
Sure.
58% on spreadsheets and emails. So that's not uncommon. We do see, a lot of organizations, small, mid-sized, even large organizations, where they still are reliant on spreadsheets and manual processes to manage a lot of their planning and forecasting processes. And that's certainly an opportunity for improvement if you really want to get more agile, do it faster, do those cycles more frequently, and embrace the notion of continuous planning. Second place here was ERP/GL systems. Do see that sometimes. You can certainly collect budgets and forecasts maybe through spreadsheets and load them into your ERP/GL for reporting and tracking purposes. Actually, a nice showing here for cloud-based EPM applications at 13%. So we are seeing increasing adoption now of packaged applications, especially cloud-based EPM applications to manage the process. I think the market numbers are a bit higher, more like 20–25% adoption levels based on other third-party research I've seen. That's really kind of where the market's going. So if you're thinking about it, deploying these kind of applications for the first time to replace spreadsheets, you really want to look at the cloud. That's kind of what the industry analysts are recommending. And certainly if you're currently using on-premises solutions, the cloud can bring some great benefits there. So thanks for your responses to the poll question. So here's some recent data that Ernie mentioned from BPM Partners on the software tools and processes published earlier this year. And when asked what their primary tool was for budgeting and planning, we do see reduced reliance on spreadsheets. This one came in at 20% in this survey, which was down from 50% a few years ago. In terms of packaged applications, in this particular survey, on-premises applications still dominated at 34%, but then you see increasing adoption of cloud-based solutions coming in there at 33% in this survey. So that's increased each year in the BPM Partners survey, and in most cases, organizations are replacing either spreadsheets or legacy applications with these modern cloud-based solutions. Another chart from the BPM Partners survey, this is actually from the 2016, didn't ask the question in 2017, but I always like to get a sense of how frequently organizations are actually running their forecasts. And here are the results from 2016. And while you'd think that quarterly forecasting has been the norm, surprisingly, 34% in that survey said they were doing their forecasts on a monthly basis, and then 24% said quarterly, and then 13% said weekly. So we do see the frequency of forecasting is now increasing, given the volatility in today's market and the availability of more data and the need to really be agile. We also saw a category there that says continuously at 9%, and I would take that to mean even more than weekly. So it could be daily or other types of frequencies. So you are seeing more and more adoption of these frequent forecasting processes. All right, next slide. All right, so I guess, Ernie, I'll back to you on this one. Do you want to comment on the barriers you see organizations hitting and moving to continuous planning?
Sure. Thank you very much, John. Yeah, so John, as you mentioned, in what you're seeing, there's still a lot of even enterprise-sized organizations that really haven't made the investment in continuous planning. And so I think part of that is really understanding the business case. And I think being successful involves removing some inherent barriers. So when you look at what it takes to get from a static to dynamic environment, it might seem like Mount Everest, but as you start to knock away at those inherent barriers, I think it's something that's a lot more palatable and might be a lot less cost intensive than you might think. So in terms of being successful, I like to keep things simple: people, process, and technology. So you kind of ask yourself, do you have the right people involved in the process, right? Is it centralized, decentralized? Do they have the right skills? Do they care? Do they have the proper incentives? Do we have the resources and support? So we can start to see gaps there in terms of people. So if we start to eliminate those inherent barriers, fill those gaps, all of a sudden the picture becomes a lot brighter. Process, is your process well defined? Is it consistent, especially if you're decentralized? Again, across departments, borders. Is the process flexible enough to allow continuous improvement? I think Rick will touch on this later. You have to have that environment of continuous improvement, and that's, for some companies, that's a culture shift. And then, of course, in terms of technology, John, you and Rick can talk a lot more about this, but the questions to ask: does your planning system facilitate collaboration? Does it allow driver-based scenarios? Do you have the right systems integration? Do you have systems integrability? Can your systems handle all the data needed? Maybe you have this big data, as John mentioned. What are you going to do with it? And then does it have that adequate functionality? So what I like to do is say, okay, let's take a look at the inherent barriers, remove them, and then we'll start to see how we move forward from there.
All right, thanks, Ernie. It's very great points. On the flip side, here's what we see in terms of success factors for implementing continuous planning. The first one is really executive support and having a strategic focus on agility, right? So if you don't have senior executive support, say the CFO or CEO, to making sure the organization really embraces and adopts these kind of techniques, and it's going to be hard to really get it implemented across the organization. Another success factor is short planning cycles, right? So we talked about earlier, you've got to be able to be rapid and agile in your planning process so you can repeat it on a regular basis. So if it takes you, 3 weeks, 4 weeks to go through a budgeting or forecasting iteration, that's going to make it pretty tough to do that on a monthly basis. You'll constantly be kind of collecting data and trying to roll it up and view it and implement those forecasts. Right technology, right, for collaborative planning and scenario modeling, and I already mentioned this in a second ago, right? So again, spreadsheets, email, creating templates, emailing them out to managers, having them fill them in, send them back to finance, have it correct all the errors, and then somehow roll the data up manually and get a view of it. That takes a lot of time and effort. Where a packaged application, especially a cloud-based application, allows users across the organization to more easily collaborate on the planning or the forecasting process. People can be entering data from their office, from a hotel room, from an airplane, anywhere they have a connection, they can log on to the cloud-based application and be able to collaborate. So that's important. And also that scenario modeling capability, the ability to do driver-based plans and forecasts, and even do what-if scenario modeling is key. Next one is buy-in from line of business managers. We see this in a lot of organizations where historically finance kind of ran the budgeting process, kind of top-down process, and line managers really didn't participate very much, didn't really buy into it, didn't really take ownership of their budgets and their forecasts. And it's really important if you're going to do continuous planning to make sure you have the buy-in and support of line of business managers that, hey guys, we're going to want you to update your budget assumptions on a regular basis and really put a lot of thought into it and take ownership and be accountable for the information you're providing. So that's really important to be successful here. Another one is just having a culture of data and fact-based decision making, right? If people want to do a once-a-year budget and just kind of run the business based on that and don't want to pay attention to what's really happening in the business, it's going to be tough to get them to buy into continuous planning. But if you do have a culture of data and fact-based decision making, then people will recognize the need to be tracking KPIs on a regular basis and taking the pulse of the business and getting updated assumptions from managers, and then really using that to make better decisions, right? To maybe stop spending money in certain areas, to shift resources from one project or one region to another, and to really make sure that you're taking advantage of new opportunities and steering away from bad opportunities. And lastly, just kind of overall commitment to continuous improvement and alignment of procedures, processes, and systems across the organization. And not saying you want to boil the ocean and get the whole organization operating on rolling forecasts all at once. In fact, the best practice typically is to maybe start in one particular area. So start small, but think big. So maybe attack sales forecasting, right, as a first area that you want to focus on and get a good rhythm going with a rolling forecast there, and maybe take it on to another area, as a second, third step. So start small but think big, but we'll try to get quick successes and then build on those successes. If we think about the benefits and business impacts of continuous planning, here's what we typically hear and see our customers reporting. One is improved forecast accuracy, maybe getting within 3 to 5% of their forecast for revenue or expenses. Improved agility, so shortening budgeting cycles down by 50% or more. Same with their forecasting cycles, then doing this in a few days, each month or each quarter. Optimization of resources, I was just talking about that a minute ago, so being able to better allocate resources towards new business opportunities. Reduce reliance on the annual budget, and we have seen a number of cases where companies started with an annual budget, added a rolling forecast to augment the budget, and then were able to eventually put less time, less detail, less costs into the annual budget, and in some cases actually eliminate the annual budget process entirely, and then really run the business based on the rolling forecast. So that's I guess the holy grail of getting beyond budgeting. And overall, right, if you do this correctly and you really do adopt it as a business process, you'll see improvements in revenue and profits and overall business performance.
Great. Thank you very much, John. I'm going to go ahead and launch our next polling question just to kind of benchmark where we're at to kind of help set the stage for your conversation with Rick. We'd like for you to share with us if your organization has adopted rolling forecasts. We have yes, you're well established. You might yes, you're in the process. No, but you're considering it. You don't really have plans at this time, or you're not sure. Again, we appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. Those of you who are interested in CTP or FP&A credit, we need you to answer all of our polling questions. And again, we have two fantastic subject matter experts here, so we appreciate all of your questions. So please give us your questions. We'll do our best to get to those in the Q&A session at the tail end of the webinar. So in order to be mindful of our time, I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another 4 seconds or so. Then I'm going to go ahead and close those, get John's initial take, and then we're going to start John's compelling interview and interactive conversation with Rick Odom. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Go ahead and share those results. And John, give me a little bit of your initial reaction here.
Yeah, so good to see the yeses there, 24%. So nice showing there. I've seen that a little higher in other polls and surveys, maybe closer to 40%. So it looks like we're getting, in the marketplace, up around 40–50% of companies, organizations adopting rolling forecasts. But good amount of the group here. Another 18% in the process. So put those together, and we're over 40%. So that's pretty good. We get another 37% no, but are considering. So hopefully this webinar will give you some tips and insights that might make you move that process forward. And then we've got a few that are saying no plans at this time. So good to see that a number of people have already embraced rolling forecasts, and a lot are thinking about it. So hopefully this webinar will help you in that process. So with that, now we're pleased to introduce Rick Odom, Senior Manager of FP&A at Hillrom. So Rick, thanks for taking the time to join us today. You want to give us kind of a quick snapshot of Hillrom and your role in the organization?
Sure. As Ernie said in the introduction, I'm a Senior Manager of FP&A. I've been actually with Welch Allyn for over 30 years. We were recently bought, well, I say recently, but about 2 years ago, we were bought by Hillrom, so we are now a subsidiary of Hillrom. We are a medical device manufacturer located in upstate New York, although we have a global operation. Our division revenues, just for Welch Allyn, are about $700 million. We have about 2,600 employees on our piece of the world. And as I said, we do business all across the globe. I oversee our forecasting and our budget process. Plus, I have business responsibilities supporting sort of the admin functions of our operation here.
Excellent. Well, I've got a set of questions I want to walk through with Rick. But again, if people in the audience have questions you want to pose to Rick or myself or Ernie, please log those in. We'll take them at the end. But let's start with your key challenges. So I guess as a business to start, kind of what are the key challenges you guys face in budgeting planning for next 12 to 18 months?
Well, interestingly enough, you and Ernie touched on it a little bit with that Aberdeen study there. And I think everybody kind of faces the same thing. The big challenge that you face on whether it's budgets or forecasting is keeping everybody on the same page. You want to have one set of assumptions that are in place, maybe for benefits, for foreign exchange rates, for merit increases in timing. You want your chart of accounts situated in such a way or set up in such a way that if somebody's talking travel, you all know which accounts roll into that, or if people are talking salaries, you know what rolls into that. Accuracy, of course, is always a challenge, especially if you're using an Excel-based system. Trying to get the numbers to roll up correctly and get the detail to match the total is a struggle. Speed is certainly an issue. If you are going to do forecasting, you need to be able to do a forecast in 2 to 3 weeks, no more, because if you're going longer than that, then it's really not a forecast. Budget processes, of course, you want those to be as short as possible too, not running 5–6 months or so. And then, of course, version control is always another challenge too. What is the accepted version of truth across the company? Which is the right number when you go down to review it? So you're not sitting there debating about in review meetings who has what number and which one is the correct one on that. So they are really kind of the challenges we faced are really the ones that that also popped up in that Aberdeen study.
Gotcha. How about volatility-wise? Is there much volatility in your business, and are you impacted by regulatory changes?
There didn't used to be years ago, but with the advent of the Affordable Care Act, there certainly were challenges for us, and there still are. We were, as part of that legislation, hit with a medical device tax, which went right to our bottom line and was in the area of several $1 million a year that we had to offset with other expense reductions in order just to hold the line on our operating income. So that popped up, and we continue to see in the medical area ups and downs and changes, over the last 7-8 years, as there's been debate back and forth about our national health care and how it should be managed. And that, of course, falls right down to us, both at Welch Allyn and at our larger parent, Hillrom, which, for the most part, puts out hospital beds, that sort of thing. But we also have a surgical division too. So we're right in the thick of it right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. So let's kind of start with budgeting. Number one, I guess, do you guys still do an annual budgeting process, and what have you done to try to streamline and reduce the pain of budgeting?
Yeah. So what we've done, let me step back a little bit. We in 2010 we got going on doing some forecasting, and we actually will do quarterly forecasts. We go out 18 months. They are rolling forecasts. And that has actually streamlined our budget process, because as you go through the year and look at each quarter, and you're continually pushing out, each time you move forward on a quarter, you actually cut in more and more to your future fiscal year's budget. So by the time you hit the third quarter on an 18-month rolling forecast, you are forecasting out your new fiscal year, but you've already seen pieces of that quarter by quarter over the last couple of forecasts. So by that point, the numbers are not a surprise. You're more comfortable with them. And so we've been able to make the process go a lot faster with forecasting. We still do an annual budget. It does seem to take a little bit extra time, rather than the short run through for forecast, but it really has streamlined our process on budgeting.
Is that taking time out of budgeting? So did it go, it was like a 5-month process, and did it get any shorter as a result of having the rolling forecast in place? Or?
Yes, most definitely. When we do a forecast, we can do a forecast really with a few tricks of the trade. We can do a forecast in about a 2 to 3 week period. And so our budget process has shortened down from being 2-3 months to really being the nuts and bolts of it are about a month long, but then the reviews seem to go for another month or so on it. So we've shortened it up considerably from what we used to do before we got into sort of a rolling forecast mode.
Yeah, that's good to hear. That's a great result. I mean, getting budgeting down to 1 month or 2 months is definitely a world-class territory. And then you did mention you have implemented some of the components of continuous planning with the rolling forecast. So you do that on a quarterly basis currently?
Yes. And so what happened back in 2010 to get us going? We had a CFO at the time who came on board and believed that we needed to do forecasting. And she really took the approach that said, I want you to just start. I know it's not going to be perfect when you first get going, but I want you to start and just get moving on it. So we started with just Excel-based spreadsheets. We had linked them all together and tried to make do with that. And for about a year, we sort of suffered through that whole process, and then decided we needed to go out and get some better technology and tools for that. And we did that. We went out and got a cloud-based EPM solution. It happens to be from Host Analytics. And we implemented that and went live with it in late 2011, early 2012 on that. And and that has really helped our process. But before we even kind of took that step to looking at a cloud-based solution, we kind of got our own house in order. And I usually tell people this when I'm talking about forecasts and that sort of thing. I have kind of multiple steps that you go through, but one of the earliest steps is really to get your house in order. And what I mean by that is look at your chart of accounts, bring some organization to it. So instead of just being a list, you've grouped like accounts together. So I touched on travel earlier. You want people to be able to look at the travel category and know what's in there. And you want that to be consistent across the globe at all your sites. Or you want them to be able to look at consulting and know which accounts roll up in that. So we are actually, our ERP system is SAP, and we went into SAP and we built sort of a hierarchy of our accounts in SAP and just carried that over into our forecasting. So when we forecast, the benefit of that is that when we forecast, you're not forecasting each individual account, but you're forecasting the groups of account. You're forecasting travel. You're forecasting salaries. You're forecasting benefits in total. You're forecasting consultants, not the individual line items. So you get your house in order from that point. You also need to look at the parts of the globe that you want to deal in and figure out what regions are important to you and organize those. And then you want to organize your products and group those as need be. And then lastly, you probably want to organize your cost centers or business units so they're grouped in certain ways. So there's a lot of housekeeping that has to happen or should happen before you actually take that step in forecasting. And once you kind of get your mind around that, it makes it easier to implement a forecast. And that's what we found. But the key is just to get started and know that you will improve it over time.
Awesome. Yeah, some great tips and advice in there in terms of getting the house in order. How about this notion of driver-based planning that we talked about earlier? Are you leveraging any of those techniques in your budgeting or forecasting process?
Well, we do a combination of things on that. So when we do a new forecast, one of the things that has gotten us the speed is that we, I'll say, seed it from the prior forecast. So when we roll it out to our people, it already has some numbers in there from the last go round, and all you're doing is you're updating things from that. So that really helps your process in terms of picking up speed on a forecast. You're just updating the things that have changed, and you're leaving everything else alone that has stayed the same. And you really do run into sort of that 80-20 rule, that 20% of it is maybe what's changed, the rest of it stays the same. Driver-based, we are getting into more and more frequently now. Hillrom does a lot related to driver-based, particularly on revenue, units, ASPs, that sort of thing. Welch Allyn has not typically done that in the past because a lot of our products are more commodity volume-based. They might be thermometer probe covers or blood pressure cuffs or something like that. And so to deal in quantities, you'd have a high quantity, a low ASP. We tended to do the total revenue on that. But Hillrom has asked us to move in that direction. So yes, we are starting to do more driver-based on it. The FP&A person that handles our sales force does it from a travel perspective in terms of our sales reps. She has sort of an average cost of travel, if you will, for a typical rep, and she uses that and the headcount for the reps to sort of drive out what the expense should be in that area. So we have a mix right now of that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's certainly how most organizations tend to adopt driver bases. Started in certain areas and kind of expanded in other areas. So that's great to hear. We talked earlier about one critical success factor is getting line of business managers, bought in to the process. How has that worked for you at Welch Allyn and Hillrom?
One of the things that you can do when you're trying to really sell forecasting to people, particularly your line business managers, and we're fortunate that our FP&A staff is really kind of deep in the business, and so we work very closely with our managers. But one of the things that really sells them is you convince them that, look, we're doing an 18-month rolling forecast. We're doing it every quarter. So in 3 months, I'm going to come back to you and ask you for an update. I'm not going to hold you to that same number for 12 months. I'm going to come back and ask your advice because, yes, the world changes. And this gives you the opportunity to point out to upper management that the world has changed, and it is more valuable to us to see your latest estimates and to see what has happened since the last forecast. So don't sweat it. You know, you're only as good as the last 3 months on it. Yes, we want you to improve your accuracy over time, that sort of thing, but we're not holding you to long term, and that really does help sort of ease the acceptance of it when they finally register that. Oh yeah, you're going to come talk to me in 3 months, and we can talk about new numbers at that point and what's changed and just deal with the differences.
Kind of setting expectations up front that, hey, this is going to be not a carved in stone, budget or forecast for the year. You're going to get a chance to revisit it periodically. It makes people feel better and kind of buy into the process.
Yeah, they feel like they're going to be able to have a voice through the year in terms of what's happening, what's changed, rather than getting beat up because something's beyond their control and it's a surprise to everybody that it happened.
Very good, very good. We already talked, I guess, about how cloud-based platform has helped. Any other comments you want to make about kind of how cloud-based solution has helped you to support the rolling forecast process?
Well, it's been great for us because one of the things that we faced is our IT has been outsourced to IBM. And so anything that we do that's technical costs us a lot of money when you have to tap into IBM. So a cloud-based solution has gotten us away from sort of the lengthy software updates that can come and having to shut things down and test before you put something into production, that sort of thing. The cloud-based has worked for us because the timing is that typically the updates come periodically at a time when you're not busy. So for us, they come on a Friday evening when people are not working. They come in the middle month of a quarter and in the middle of a month. So you're not hitting either month end or quarter end, that kind of thing. And it has allowed us to sort of support the software within finance without having very specific and expensive IT people assigned to it. I know on our ERP system, as I said, it's SAP, and trying to find people with an expertise in SAP, whether it's in the finance modules or any of the modules, is very difficult and very expensive these days. So it's helped from that standpoint in us maintaining the systems and having some independence.
Gotcha. How about the collaboration aspect? Has a cloud-based solution helped in terms of, especially line of business managers collaborating in the forecasting process?
It helps from the standpoint then that you can access it from anywhere, and it's just easy to get at, easy to set people up, and easy to add people if you need to, that sort of thing. So, and people can, it's much easier seems to be easier to access it from home or when you're on the road or at work, that sort of thing. So from that standpoint, the cloud base has been a plus to us.
Okay, good. How about talk about some of the impacts on your business processes? Have you seen any impacts on the business by moving to continuous planning techniques?
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, one thing certainly has been speed in terms of both our forecast and the budget, and that certainly frees up resources, and it has allowed us to do really more analytical work rather than just pushing the pencils to get the numbers together on that. And we've seen a benefit from that standpoint. We also, because we're kind of doing this quarterly, have seen some benefit in our accuracy. Now, we still have issues there, but you get better over time. We do have sort of a finance objective across the board to be plus or minus 3% over a quarter on our forecasts, both in terms of revenue and expenses on that. And we're measured on that, and that's part of our compensation in terms of our bonus, one of the contributors to that. So we've been able to sort of put that incentive back out to people and find a way to encourage them to get better on it. But it's also, given us improvements in terms of one set of assumptions to build the budget on. We can control across the globe when things like merits are happening, what the assumptions are on FX rates, everybody's operating off the same set of rules, if you will, in building the budget. There are no variances there. And then when you're done and you're trying to review it, again, you get back to the proverbial one source of truth on that. And that saves a tremendous amount of time because nobody's fishing for numbers trying to figure out where a particular number cropped up from. They can go to one source, pick it up. And then in the future, as you're going through the year, you can always refer back to these forecasts, particularly on a cloud-based system like we have, and look up and say, okay, what did I budget for this? What did I put in there and assume for my 20 or 25 different software vendors? What did I assume for dollar amounts on there for the budget? Because you've built up at a lower level of detail. Or I'm looking to run, what we had for assumptions for headcount additions, that kind of thing. So on many fronts, it has made our process much more efficient and taken us away from sort of the drudgery work and let us do our analytical jobs.
Excellent, excellent. Where do you guys go from here? What are your plans for the future in terms of continuing to refine your planning and forecasting?
Well, one of our challenges at this point is to, since we've been acquired, is to hopefully promote our lessons learned with a larger company who was the acquirer. Usually when you're in this situation and you've been acquired, oftentimes you're kind of lost. You lost your voice to some extent and you've got to prove yourself out. We are getting to that point now where they realize that Welch Allyn does have some knowledge in this area. They're starting to listen to us and learn from our lessons. So going forward, we're looking at sort of expanding out and sort of bringing the message to greater Hillrom at that point. And then as I alluded to earlier, Hillrom has asked us to get more into driver-based planning and forecasting, and we'll certainly move in that direction.
Excellent, excellent. Best of luck with that, and it's kind of spreading your best practices across the organization. So I guess at this point, Ernie, if you want to go to any questions we have from the audience, this would be a great time to shift to there.
Sure, John. Let me go ahead and offer some closing thoughts, and then we'll go ahead and jump in to the Q&A. So John and Rick, great content and great insight. So just some closing thoughts. This is one of the slides I would print off. I like to suggest slides to print off. I think we've made the point clear. Effective budgeting and planning and forecasting starts with removing and mitigating inherent barriers to success. A lot of times you look at people, process, technology, it'll make success much easier to achieve. And then technology to deliver best-in-class strategic value is no longer cost prohibitive for most companies, but it still might need to be right-sized. Continuous dynamic planning and forecasting enables strategic agility and aligns decisions across the enterprise to optimize variables that impact shareholder value. Again, I think a common theme that we've seen is really the enterprise-wide visibility, and that's what really enables the strategic agility. That continuous planning allows companies to function in an increasingly dynamic environment more effectively. And then the last point that I'd like to make, of course, we would offer you some great insights, but one of the things that we're trying to help you do is also ask the right questions, engage with the right folks at your company, and also engage with those who face the same challenges as you, other FP&A leaders, other CFOs. So I encourage you to develop professional connections with those of you who face the same challenges, and a great way to do that is on LinkedIn. A lot of LinkedIn groups, a lot of free resources, so I'd encourage you to go out on LinkedIn. And then I have a few additional resources which you can take a look at your convenience after the webinar, but there's some great resources that gives a lot more depth to a lot of the content that John and Rick covered: continuous planning, rolling forecasts, and financial forecasting and best practices. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick off the Q&A session. John, let me go ahead and give you the first question your way. So you mentioned earlier, this kind of stuck in my mind, that there are still quite a few enterprise companies that are still really leaning on Excel to a great extent. Can you tell me, what do you think is that, or a couple of the key factors that are really holding these companies back in terms of moving towards that continuous planning environment?
Yeah, good question. I think in large enterprises, oftentimes you see like the core financial budgeting process that might be managed currently using a packaged software application. But I think where the spreadsheets tend to crop up is in all these other processes that are kind of adjunct to the core financial budgeting process. So it might be, detailed headcount, salary, compensation planning is still being done offline in spreadsheets. CapEx planning still being done in spreadsheets. Project planning, sales forecasting, and all these other kind of adjunct planning processes still being done in spreadsheets, and then somehow it's got to feed into the financial budgeting planning process. So that's an opportunity certainly for improvement, right? To have a more enterprise-wide system that can accommodate all those various types of planning requirements in a single system, and then connect them to each other better, so that when you're looking at the financial budget and you want to see the assumptions that were made in the workforce plan or the CapEx plan or the sales forecast, you actually can drill back into it. So it's probably just inertia. Companies kind of get set in their ways and with certain processes, and they don't have the time to improve. They're just too busy. But again, this is a good time of year to be thinking about how you can improve your budgeting planning processes, and think about how life could be easier on the other side. It might take a little bit of work to rethink the process and put a new system in place. But on the other end, you're going to see a lot of benefits, as Rick mentioned, in terms of streamlining the process and freeing up finance to do more value-added activities.
Okay, great. John, let me go ahead and follow up on that question. So to me, in some cases, I see that I think an issue might be in the ability to make that effective business case. So can you share with us what you might see in the market on where you might think people aren't really considering all the aspects of the ROI to making this change, and where people might spend more time in quantifying some of those benefits?
Yeah, and then Rick might be the way in this as well, but typically, thinking about the business case and kind of where you can save money. Certainly, if you're currently using some kind of legacy application that you've had for 10 plus years, it's running in your data center, right? And there's a opportunity to reduce costs right there. I mean, we've had organizations that were facing a major upgrade. It was going to cost them $500,000 to $1 million just to upgrade that existing system, and they decided to look around at alternatives and found cloud-based solution was going to take that big investment and the time and effort to do that upgrade off the table and put them into a subscription-based solution that was going to have more regular, consistent costs over time, and overall reduce the cost of the system. So that's kind of one piece to look at. And then from a process standpoint, if you have 20 people in finance, working 5 months a year on the annual budget process, you can take that down from 5 months to 2 months. As Rick mentioned, where they are, I mean, there's the opportunity to redeploy those people into other activities. Working with line of business to help them with decision making and forecasting and analysis, right? So there's savings opportunities there that could avoid you having to hire new people in the future. So those are some of the big things we see. And then the reporting side of it is another opportunity. We didn't talk about that much in today's session, but along with budgeting, it goes reporting of the budget and reporting actuals against the budget. And if that's taking too much time and effort in the organization, and that can be reduced by 50 to 75% with modern cloud-based tools, there's another opportunity for saving time and effort and resources and having people focus on other things. And Rick, any other thoughts from your standpoint on the business case?
Yeah, I think one of the big things for us was improvement in workforce planning. If you do it right with a cloud-based solution and one that has strong workforce planning tools built into it, you can really see some efficiencies and savings and an advantage of going that route. If you stop and think about it, your labor costs, for the most part, are probably anywhere from maybe 2/3 to 3/4 of your total expenses. And so trying to manage that effectively is key. And if you can, each quarter we load up all of our people, salaries, all the detail, that sort of stuff. And we ask people to load in their headcount additions, that sort of thing. If you've done all that and got yourself organized on that, then you can look at things saying, okay, what's the timing of our headcount adds? What if we slide those out a quarter? What's the savings on that? You just get a better handle on the spend of one of your largest expenses overall on this. And that's where we've seen a huge benefit in terms of our spending patterns, is to really go after something that is a strong, we went with a solution that has a strong workforce planning element to it. And I wouldn't shy away from that if you were thinking about going into forecasting.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Next couple questions, I'll go ahead and direct your way, Rick. So a couple questions around this. So in terms of kind of implementing this type of philosophy, this web-based solution, can you speak to us about maybe challenges or things might not have been as challenging as you thought in terms of getting people off of Excel and onto this web-based system? Can you talk about how it's set up? Is it easy to, is it train people? So how is that challenge and how are you able to overcome that?
Well, we were fortunate in that when we were out looking, we looked at sort of the Gartner Magic Quadrant. We looked at a couple of possibilities, one of which was SAP, and then Host surfaced up also, and a few others, Profix, and a couple others that escaped my mind from 7 or 8 years ago. But one of the reasons we went with Host is that it has the look and feel of Excel. And so rolling it out to our people, they were comfortable with it. It looks like a spreadsheet. Formulas that they were used to would work in there. And so that really helped pushing it out. On top of that, it was just a requirement saying that, hey, this is what you're going to have to do. And oh, by the way, we'll train you on it, but we expect to pull our numbers out of this system. And so you're going to have to get used to doing it. But the fact that it really had that look and feel of Excel was a big plus for us and really made the rollout a lot easier.
Okay, great. Just another couple questions around this as well. In terms of the systems involved, can you speak to how it's been in terms of passing data back and forth between your web-based solution and your ERP and maybe some other, maybe HR systems? How has that been?
Yes. So one of the things that when we started this, we wanted to keep it simple, particularly since we had our IT outsourced. And so we did not do any sort of automatic loads from the start. And we, again, fortunately chose a product that it was very easy to load up to actual. So we've continued actually to this day to do manual load. So when we close the month at sort of day 2.5, I spend that next half day pulling down actuals out of SAP and loading them up into Host. If you can get data into Excel spreadsheet, you can get it loaded up fairly easily into the ERP or the EPM solution that we use from Host on that. SAP is notoriously difficult for getting data out of it. So we wanted to keep that simple. So we've gotten fairly good at uploading it. Same thing with our heads. We pull the data down out of PeopleSoft at this point into a spreadsheet, and then I just I do a little bit of manipulation, what have you, and then I just push it back up. But the loads really don't take that long on it. At the time that we were required 2 years ago, we were starting to look at automating that. And I know people who have been at companies where they have automated it so that they're getting actuals downloaded every evening, that sort of thing, and out of SAP, and they liked it better. And so we were headed that direction. But of course, with the acquisition, we had to put everything on hold until our parent company sort of sorted out all our systems and we decided where to go forward on this.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and launch our third polling question as I ask John our final question before we wrap up the Q&A session. Kind of a quick two-part question, John. You and I have been speaking about web-based applications for probably the last 7 years or so. Can you share with me some of the myths that still exist, possibly that are only myths, and then some of the questions that your clients and potential clients used to have, they don't have anymore? And then finally, can you share with us kind of what's next in terms of functionality in the EPM solution space?
Sure. I think the biggest change we've seen in the last probably 5-6 years is initially finance was a little squirrely about the security of cloud-based systems. Hey, should I really put my financial data out there in the cloud? And we saw cloud take off initially in CRMs. People started putting their customer data in the cloud with things like Salesforce.com. We saw HR move to embrace the cloud rapidly. So now we're putting workforce information in the cloud. So I think finance finally saw, hey, maybe this is a way to go and a secure place to put my financials. And over the last 5-6 years, we've seen rapid increase in the adoption of cloud-based applications and finance becoming much more comfortable in the security of the data they're going to put out there, and certainly the availability and performance of cloud-based systems. Now it's becoming the de facto way to go. In fact, this year in Gartner's Magic Quadrant reports for not just CPM, corporate performance management, also in financials, they did cloud only. They only covered cloud products and cloud vendors in those reports because they feel that's the best way to go now instead of on-premises data centers. So that's really what's changed probably the most the last couple of years is the kind of thinking about the security of the cloud. So what's next? A lot of cool things coming down the pike here. There's a lot of opportunities now to leverage bigger data sources that are companies are trying to tap into. Predictive modeling capabilities. So you can take that big data, run predictive models over it, use that to drive your sales forecast. Use of social media as well. So a lot of cool things we're doing, and you'll see that unfolding over the next year or two.
Great. So thank you very much. With that, I'm going to officially close our Q&A session. So first, thank you very much to Rick and John for your fantastic insight. Thank you very much for that. I'd like to once again thank our sponsor, Host Analytics. We appreciate their commitment to thought leadership, which is also evident in the great content and resources which you can review by visiting the Host Analytics website. And finally, thank you very much to our audience. Make the rest of your day great, everyone.